one of the points that you've made in the keynote in your research is kind of there's jobs as a way of thinking and skills as a way of thinking. Can those coexist, or do you feel like we're kind of moving out of one and into the other?
Yeah, so they absolutely can coexist, and I'm glad you asked the question, because I think many folks, when they hear skills, they view it as kind of a binary narrative, right? Jobs versus skills. And actually the reality is what we're looking at is a need for much smaller building blocks for work. So the job will still exist, and it's going to, many jobs are becoming increasingly more skills focused or skill sensitive. But what we're also seeing, when we have skills as the currency, work gets to be done in a job versus an assignment, a gig, or a project. And that, I think, is the beauty of having these smaller building blocks, versus if it's a job, you're limited to thinking about a person in that job 100% of his or her time, versus when we go to skills, you've got these smaller building blocks that do two things. They allow you to connect talent to work through a whole variety of means, and also see how AI might impact the work being done. And then secondly, it also helps you broaden the aperture of work to make it much more accessible to more people, rather than limiting it to just this degree matched to a person, matched to a position, versus thinking about, you know, the unique bundle of skills that's Jill versus Ravin, and the many different ways in which we could contribute.
One of the things you said that you can see I've taken some notes that I thought was really interesting was the cycle of learning and doing, and learning and doing, and learning and doing. And I think that's really fascinating, and also kind of inspiring for a lot of us that I think are curious and would enjoy having a life of work filled with learning.
Absolutely. You know, that's one of the things that when I did that documentary series with PBS on the future of work, that's one of the things that I feel is really at the crux of this change. It's not just a change in HR or work or organizations, it's a societal change, because the old promise was, you know, you learned for 12 or 18 years, you acquired a set of skills, you were promised a job, and you know, a job that was largely static, that existed there, and then you were promised a retirement. Well, over the last 30 years, we've chipped away at that, right? Yeah. So few people, particularly in this country, have those defined benefit plans that promised a fully funded retirement. You know, this notion of a promise of employment is gone, and it's increasingly replaced by progressive companies saying, we'll promise you employability, right? We'll give you the promise of perpetual relevance for a changing world. But the onus is really on us as individuals, you know, to keep upskilling and reskilling. So it does, as you rightly point out, place a big premium on curiosity, on learning agility, and I think, you know, for those of us who are that way, that's great, you know. But I do think it can't just be the purview of an elite few, right? I think it's incumbent on every person, you know, to be curious, to have that learning agility, and to be supported in that quest.
One of the things that I was thinking about when you were talking about this concept was how for many generations, employers counted on that, like, loyalty. I wrote down, like, the gold watch upon retirement, and what they can offer in exchange to kind of say, we do want you to stick around because we value you. And you've just said something, the perpetual employability. Was that what you just said?
Yes.
I feel like that's kind of the value proposition.
Right. Yeah. I have a client, an airline, who just absolutely said it beautifully to crystallize this. As you know, many airlines, you know, you have 3 generations of the same family working there. Yeah. And it was this promise of, you know, come join us, you'll get these great flight benefits, you'll travel the world. And most airlines in the past, you know, were able to promise that the gold watch, right? Yeah. And you were in unionized jobs very often. But this organization said, you know, that's really a false promise. We no longer have the luxury of offering that. But we're going to change our value proposition to saying we will develop you for opportunity, either within or without, which I thought was incredibly honest and transparent. And their promise was, you know, we deliver world-class training in customer care and customer service, and that training has immense value for us when you're here, but it also has immense value for the rest of the hospitality sector. Yeah. So our promise to you is, you know, you'll be here for a period of time, when you or we feel it's time for you to move on, or do something different, you'll maybe upskill into a different role. You might, or we might outskill you to one of our partners. In other words, we'll help place you with a hotel chain, where our training is so valued and that you're getting in, at a higher level in the organization because of the skills you're bringing. Alternatively, we can give you a stipend to go back and acquire new skills. If you want to go back to get a college degree, if you want to go back to get a new set of technical skills, you'll have a stipend at the end of it.
You mentioned outskilling, which is a great word I haven't heard, working with maybe the idea that there's more collaboration, and I'm even seeing this here, integration between tech, maybe this idea that we aren't all as an organization kind of fending for ourselves. That's a shift, right?
It absolutely, I'm so glad you asked that question, Jill, because in the book we talk about, permeable boundaries, and increasingly companies are recognizing that the age-old model of my organization has these hard walls and I want 100% loyalty, and anyone who leaves it's a personal betrayal, to now recognizing that we actually have an opportunity to manage as an ecosystem. So one of the experiments that the World Economic Forum has done is to look at mobility across the consumer and packaged goods sector. So as demand at companies like Unilever might change, how might they transition talent to Walmart, and where the needs for some of those skills may be most pronounced, and how could we share talent through an open ecosystem, and doing it with as little frictional cost. And you saw this actually during COVID. We saw a number of companies, and we helped airlines actually transition because no one was flying, transition their baggage handlers to working in the distribution hubs of retail companies, because demand for retail goods spiked like crazy, right? And those baggage handlers had all the skills that were needed, but instead of them filing for unemployment, claiming unemployment benefits, and then looking for work, and that ridiculously long cycle that has a big burden on the taxpayer, actually saying, we're going to transition you en masse, so that everyone in this airline hub, in this baggage center, move to company XYZ's retail distribution center. And they were matched, it was a private agreement between the two companies, and it was just a fascinating way of, again, increasing the transferability and portability of skills.